everyone. My name is Jesse Chason with Lisa Blanchard as the host of Airing Addiction.
I share often my journey started on this campus. Got sober as a client here, just like you.
I really do see phenomenal change.
Always hope. I've seen situations that on the surface look impossible become possible.
Doing this podcast is to share those recovery stories, be honest about what the challenges are and have some real conversations, but kind of share that out on the airwaves.
Welcome everybody to Airing Addiction, and welcome everybody to week 4 of Recovery Month. If you've listened to the last 3 episodes, you know that each week we have a theme, and we have some incredible, amazing guests. Before we hit record today on this week's podcast, we were just talking about how fall is in the air and the air is a little crisper, and maybe we're starting to, turn on. I know I had a little fire going last night, and just how we're turning the month into fall, and what a better way to I can't think of a better way to do that transition than our guests that I will let Lisa introduce here today. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Jesse. Thanks so much. We were just also saying that Recovery Month is one of my favorite months. Of course, we get to celebrate recovery, but we get to celebrate all the things that actually support recovery. And this is why I'm really excited for this week's episode, because the theme for this week, kind of the national theme for Recovery Month, is purpose. And of course, there's so much purpose in all aspects of recovery. But what we know is that sharing stories in whatever way we can actually multiplies recovery and gives purpose back. And art is one of those ways to tell a story. And so that's what our episode today is about. And so I'm really excited to have our 2 guests here with me today. I have Michelle May, who is our founding partner at Juniper Rag and Atelier ID Global. She's a painter, a wonderful painter. I happen to know that very personally. She has been really working to elevate artists. Has an art magazine called Juniper Rag. Please check that out. Please follow and like all of her fantastic art and the artists that she shares. So we can talk more about kind of what that looks like, but I also want to introduce Nancy Wright, who is a wonderful photographer and was part of this wonderful project I'm about to talk a bit about. So Nancy is a photographer focused primarily on nature, wildlife, and capturing abstract moments. And so that's just a really awesome way to think about what art and recovery might look like. Like, how might art have a place in recovery, both for those who are working towards or in recovery and those who have experienced the impacts of addiction, right? Which we know, we had a whole episode on family and home. We talk about this all the time. We had a whole episode on community. Addiction and recovery impact not just the individual that is going through that, but also those around them, their broader community, those in their lives, their family, their loved ones. And so we recently did a really fantastic project partnering with Michelle and Juniper Rag and the work that they do to curate wonderful art and to do calls for art. And we were opening a new program in Worcester. So at 1023 Main Street, please come check it out. Come stop by. It is essentially an art gallery now. And we welcome folks in the community to just pop in and see what treatment and recovery spaces look like and what art and recovery looks like. But we wanted to do something different, right? With not just decorating our walls, not just putting things up that look nice or that we think fit a theme or, fit kind of some design scheme. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we wanted to have a little more purpose in what we decided to do in that space. And so what we asked Michelle to support us with is curating a call for art for artists touched by addiction. And I don't think any of us expected the response that we got to that call. And I certainly didn't expect the beautiful art that came into our space and what that has meant and what it continues to mean going forward. So I'd love, Michelle, for you to feel free to start us off with a little more about yourself beyond kind of the brief words I said, and talk a little bit about what from your perspective what that project did for you.
Sure, Lisa, thank you. First of all, it was a complete privilege and an honor to curate this collection for Spectrum and connect with artists in a new way, because this was a completely new kind of outreach that we had. Juniper Rag has live exhibitions and virtual exhibitions, and we normally have a call for art, and it's kind of thematic each call, and the artists submit art and we show it either live or online. But for this call, we really wanted to connect with the community, and that was the vision of Spectrum. And the core of this project was to connect with the community, bring art that had a purpose into the space, and to share it with not just the visitors of Main Street, but also the employees and, you know, everyone that comes through the hallways of the building, because it can really transform a space. So this call was very different than our other calls, where we really looked at the artist statements and listened to certain aspects about this art that resonated with the call and with Spectrum's goals. So it was impactful in new ways that it was pretty magical for us, actually, to witness the different things that happened along the way with this call. The impact and the vulnerability that the artist showed really was important and lasting. So it actually changed our focus with Juniper Rag a lot, in that we'd like to do this more often, because it just brought so much impact to us for changing atmospheres and environments in the building.
And I'm sure changing artists, right? So, you know, the impact
Absolutely.
is not on who receives it, but on who submits it, and the
Mhm.
impact of kind of, you know, it's not typical, your artist statement, from what I gather, right? Really just being, you know, what I like to remind me I'm an art appreciator, right? That's my role in this space. I don't have any skill or talent, but I like to appreciate art, right? But artist statements are usually like about kind of the person, like what brings them to art, kind of the medium they use, what, you know, it might have some themes, it might have, but less so about each piece, right? That like there's some really, really in-depth vulnerability about the why this piece, and why this piece for a call for art for artists touched by addiction, right? It's just a little more specific.
Yes, absolutely. And we had a list of criteria of what was important for this call, and it had to be art that resonated with meaningful stories, but it also had to be art that would have an effect on the environment in a way that just enhanced mood, enhanced well-being, enhanced, you know, a list of things that we decided were important for the environment at Spectrum. So there's a wide range of art, but it's very cohesive, which was really interesting too, that this body of work kind of made itself. So, you know, and as much art came in, we took almost as much art that came in with the call. So it was really nice that way too.
Wow. Wow. I too, like Lisa, am a art appreciator. I like that. Like that term. I might have to steal that from you, Lisa. And like we were talking before we hit record on this podcast, I have a art wall right behind my computer in my home office here. And actually, I was thinking as you were talking, Michelle, the very first thing I hung up in this space was a recovery picture that someone made for me. And it's been hanging up there now for years. Wonder if you could just talk a little bit more. You had said something there about how this call for art really changed the way that your organization does things, and how Juniper Rag, their mission and vision. If you could just speak to a little bit more about that, please.
Sure. We're following the same core mission that we always have, but the impact of this project, Artists Touched by Addiction with Spectrum, really gave us a purpose that, if I'm selfish, I'm saying it felt very good to help people to share the artist's work and to share the stories, to watch conversations develop between the artists, and to just see all these magical byproducts of the whole program, from the call for art to the art drop off, even where conversations started, to even this podcast now. So it just had a different effect than our regular calls for art do. And I think the purpose is the driver for us.
One thing I'll say is, I actually don't mind that term, kind of doing good feels selfish. It reminds me of, I think it's the Dalai Lama that calls it wise selfishness. And it's really that concept of that when you do good, you feel good, right? And that there's like nothing wrong with that. Like that is wise selfishness. Like you're doing good because you know it will make you feel good, and that's multiplying that. And I would echo, and I think that would be a great lead in to hear from Nancy, because I was at some of those art drop off, including that's when I got to meet Nancy for the first time. And that's really snowballed into a great, relationship and conversation. But, that was, there was kind of a bit emotional for some of that art drop off, right? Which not, people, the artists, I'm sure, are emotional about their work in a lot of ways. And I'm sure there's always emotion kind of leaving your art behind, right? For somebody else to put up, and then maybe it doesn't come back to you, maybe it leaves, right? And this was going into a collection, so the artist knew this was not coming back, but there was like that extra layer of emotion and connection, I think, in that art drop off.
Absolutely. I have to say, as a project that I did for the first time in a meaningful way, typically when I submit artwork, I go through my photos and pick them. But for this one, as soon as I saw the call for art, it resonated immensely. And just as I was invited to this podcast, the meaning of it keeps rippling, which is fabulous. I'm a nature photographer, and I've won national, regional, and local awards, which is wonderful and validating. But I can honestly say that this call for art has been the most meaningful in my career so far. And that surprised me, which was different in and of itself. But throughout this whole process, I wrote some notes that I'm going to refer to, because I don't want to miss anything, because this is such an important topic. Focusing on the quiet power of art is what I got from this in the very beginning, and it is healing. My experience with addiction, I would say ended, but it's ongoing in my head, but ended probably around 2019. And I find that art is a conversation starter with yourself and with others. One thing that I read recently is that art helps you turn pain into patterns. And I loved that. And as soon as I read this addiction call for art, I was transported back to the time when I was witnessing a young man navigate addiction. And that lasted for the 10 years. He was only 14 years old when it started. And every time I worked on my piece, I could feel my energy shift and eventually uplift, because his story has a happy ending. And I feel like the same could be true for others who view this whole collection at Spectrum. They could be transported to another world, because when you look at a piece of art, you see something, but you also feel something, you interpret something, you can get lost as you linger. And when you hear the stories behind the art, your feelings might even shift more. So I really feel like art makes you think and feel and contemplate and find inspiration and healing by connecting with the piece and allowing your mind to go on a journey of hope and that renewed sense of purpose. And for me, this call for art reminded me that hopeless only means less hope. The beauty of art is that it can lead you to more hope. And this call for art also gave me a new sense of purpose, because I know now that my print will ignite conversations and my story will let others know that there is hope. And I feel like that's really powerful.
Nancy, I have to say, Jesse and I almost laugh about it because it's rare that we have an episode where the word hope doesn't come up. Like, I get we're in the recovery space, but but that's the first time I've heard that wording, and I want to steal that, right? So, that like, hope doesn't mean, there's no hope. Hopeless doesn't mean no hope. It means there's just less hope, right? But that leaves room for hope to still enter the room and still increase from there. And so just so folks know, these pieces in this collection in the program at 1023 Main Street are not just in the lobby. They're not just in the medication area. They're in offices, right? So they're in actual administrator, which I think is where yours lives, Nancy. So a lot of people get to spend some time there, in therapists' offices, in case managers' offices. And so I think you're exactly right, right? So there is that opportunity to look around the room when you're having a conversation focused on your recovery, which is inherently a vulnerable moment,
Yep.
and reflect on that art piece and start more conversations. And we also asked, and I think we ended up with, I think most everyone included a bit of their statement to be put next to the piece, right? So you can do your own, interpretation. You can do your own kind of, appreciating and observing and telling the story behind the art. And you get to actually read, which is not common, right? The story behind that art, for that person, and really work on magnifying that hope.
Yeah. And I have to say, I was on the sidelines in my situation, so I wasn't really in it. But even from the sidelines, you could see the hopelessness. Like, you could feel it. It was palpable. And it lasted for such a long time. So again, I really feel like having the artwork is another vehicle for providing hope, because it's when you're in the thick of it, it's tough to have hope. So to have that additional vehicle to shift your focus, I think is great.
It sure is. And for all those that are listening that maybe are kicking this recovery idea around, or, maybe have been to inpatient treatment and had a less than desirable experience, shameless plug for Spectrum Health Systems and New England Recovery Center, that, I would love to, I can confidently say that, these spaces and places through great leadership at our organization are designed so that, they feel comfortable. They feel like a home away from home almost. And I can say that as someone who's worked here now for 8 years and someone who has been in treatment here before as a patient, even though I didn't obviously have the opportunity to have these beautiful paintings in the offices that I was doing my personal therapy in. But there was, there was decorations, there was paintings on the wall, there were pieces that, just speak to that hope that you mentioned, Nancy, that, there is life after addiction. There is a solution. There can be hope. And it really resonated powerfully with me both in that time and now. Just, I second what Lisa said. Anybody that's interested, that's listening and wants to check out what these actual art pieces are, juniperrag.com, right, Michelle? That's the website.
Yes. Yeah.
juniperrag.com, to check out. I know when I first went on there, I was blown away by the amazing artwork. And I just have to say, huge shout out to all the artists. Just what amazing, powerful work that is on there and on the walls at 1023 Main.
Yeah, Michelle, how many artists were there? 16?
There were 18 artists. And yeah, the art is really transformative, and using original art to personalize a space, like you just said, Jesse, it not only transforms it, but it gives it a personality, and it makes it feel comfortable and welcoming. And, when there's a beautiful painting at the end of the hallway as you're walking down, it's exciting to get to the end of the hallway so that you can take a moment to see the piece of art and take in the colors and the movement and things like that. And it just really changes any space.
Yeah, and you mentioned the diversity. I'm floored by the diversity of this collection. and it is cohesive, that's a tough thing to do. So kudos to you, Michelle, and your team, because
It magically happened, Nancy.
I don't think so. I think there's something behind it with you and Pale's efforts, but yeah, the diversity of it all is incredible. And as Lisa had mentioned, there are the stories next to the pieces, so it feels like you're walking through a gallery. It's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. And those stories that we were talking about, the artist statements and the stories, I have to say, this is another difference with this collection. The stories from the artists are actually what motivated selection first. People like the art at first glance, but it was the stories and their impact that really resonated with everyone that was choosing the art. We put forward the collection that we thought would resonate, but it was very interesting for us to see the folks at Spectrum really dig into these statements and connect with the artists and their stories, especially, the one story about Howard Johnson, who was an artist that actually grew up in the neighborhood. So I think that story was the most celebrated because he actually came from the neighborhood that you were trying to connect with and the community you were trying to connect with. And it was just wonderful to see how these stories found their way into the hearts of the folks at Spectrum and help create the collection.
And that's part of what we're trying to do at 1023 Main Street in general. It's part of why we moved to that location, is to be directly in the community where we can support those in that community, right? And be part of transforming that community. So you're so right, Michelle, having, an artist that actually was directly from that community, share his story, share his recovery path, and include that art there, that matters so much, right? We talk about this on the podcast all the time. We had community and peer recovery last week, right? That power of somebody's recovery story impacting others has been around for, a couple of 100 years now at this point, and it doesn't stop being impactful in whichever way we can share someone's recovery story. And so, a big driver of this was to really impact those that we're supporting, right? Impact our patients directly. And so having this be as meaningful, not just beautiful art, there's definitely a place for beautiful art, but having that beautiful art that has the meaning that ties directly to the recovery community, to the community that they're directly in and impacted by, it matters, right? So when somebody walks by that, reads, for example, his artist statement, it says right on there that he's from that space, that he's from, it matters, right? So you can say, that this individual kind of maybe walked a similar path to what I walked, and now they're, submitting art for collections, and maybe I could do that, and I think that's part of the power of sharing recovery stories.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more relatable, or can make it more relatable. I'm sure there are people who come through your doors who have not given art a second thought, and if they see something that they're drawn to, that's one thing. But even if they're not drawn to it and they read the story, then they start to find meaning in the art and, tie it into their story, perhaps.
And I love that concept. Go ahead, Jesse.
I was just going to reflect that, it fits with this week's theme of purpose. It's beautiful art with a purpose. Again, I was blown away when I first saw this on the press release or the website, whatever came first, and all the abstract art. And then I had the opportunity to actually go with Lisa to 1023 Main Street for a meeting and check out some of the pieces. Yes, it's beautiful art, but I'm a in the weeds kind of deep end of the pool kind of guy. So I love the fact that there's these, explanations and artist stories with it. My wife makes fun of me all the time because I'll stop and read something on the side of the road that has like a, here in 1872 this happened, and I find that amazing because it it richens my experience just walking around doing everyday life. And again, to reflect on the people who are like Howard, who is literally, in that space and then come full circle. Like, I love a good full circle story. I love a good
Mhm.
hopeful circle story. Yeah.
And we hear consistently from folks that, we've had the podcast, of course, patients and recovery stories and the work that we do, that, addiction can be so hijacking, right? Even for loved ones, right? And that's probably not dissimilar from your experience, Nancy, of like how overwhelming it can feel to try to care for or support someone working towards recovery or struggling with active addiction. And it's really hard to stop and pay attention to the beauty that still exists in the moment. And so this provides that opportunity for that pause, for that appreciation, and hopefully gives the message that, art and creating art, appreciating art, wherever you are in that list, can happen at any point, right? It doesn't have to be, we talk a lot about kind of that Maslow hierarchy of needs, kind of that like the bottom of the pyramid is kind of your basic housing, your food, your water, those things. And then we've got some, safety and then belonging. And then we get up to like, self-actualization and kind of working on those things. But there's a place for art all the way down to the bottom of that pyramid, right? You don't have to be in a perfect space to do this. In fact, it can be supportive and healing at the bottom there, at the most difficult times, to actually help create that belonging, create that safety, create some of the things that will support long-term recovery.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, like, Jesse, you said you don't have an artistic bone in your body, essentially, but you do. You do. We all did. So at some point in our lives, as children, somebody said, oh, so-and-so's map is better than your map. Each person is creative. And I'm so grateful to be an artist and to be surrounded by artists. And every single one of them says how much creating art helps them get through struggles in their life. Yeah. So I just want to drive that home, that we're all artists. If we can find a way to be creative a little bit, doing something, a doodle, it gives you a 5-minute break. It gives you 5 minutes of meditation time. More time is better. So if you can sit down and find something to do, something to make, woodworking, anything like this is creative and meditative and helps people process. So I think you should try some art, Jesse.
I received that, Michelle, and I do enjoy woodworking. I never thought of that as art.
It is. It's creativity. Yeah.
I enjoy building things with wood. And just to speak to what Lisa said and what you echoed, Michelle, about, you don't have to be this amazing artist to start. If anyone's in early recovery listening to this, and you just are having a hard time trying to fill your day, or maybe you get bored easily, there are so many great art journals and painting and coloring and all sorts of opportunities. I think back to all the arts and crafts classes we've had, that I've had the pleasure of helping facilitate inpatient at Spectrum, and just talk about hope. Just you can feel the sense in the room. You can it's tangible that no matter what's going on, and as one can imagine, there's lots of things to be stressed out about when you're in inpatient treatment, mainly what's next, where do I go from here? But for that time, it's just this brief respite where people are really, you talk about meditation, Michelle. It's a beautiful meditation to see, and some of the greatest pieces of art that I've been able to witness have come out of those groups. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
And I just want to say too, materials, you think about materials costing money, but a lot of artists that I know make art out of recycled materials. So whether it's the simplicity of a coloring book, like you said, that's so relaxing to just sit and color in a coloring book. But you can make art with whatever you can get your hands on. An old pair of jeans, you could cut them up and make a collage with that. So there's so many ways to make art. You just have to, use the materials around you.
Jesse, that makes me think of, and I'm sure you probably remember this because you worked in this building too, but we often have our patients, particularly in longer term programs, whether it's a 2 to 4 week stabilization unit or a longer term residential, incorporate art into their day. And we had this one patient who built an entire ship
Wow.
out of toothpicks.
Wow.
Yes.
And it was and a bunch of other small things, like they were just like, can you get these random supplies? All like practically free supplies, really.
Yep.
It was the most amazing thing. It was huge. I mean, this big. I mean, huge. And we ended up putting it in a glass case, like to preserve it forever on the program. And
I do remember that.
Point, right? You can start just like everything else in recovery, start with what you have and where you are. And that's really all you need to do. And I love the discussion about the meditative qualities, because there's some neuroscience behind, meditation and art, that it activates parts of your brain that when you're in kind of a hypervigilant or fight or flight space, which you live in most of the time, often in active addiction, when parts of your brain, are really hijacked, by the challenges that come with the chronic brain disease of addiction, you have to build new neural pathways, right, in recovery. You have to start changing that and creating space for that, and entering art into that is one wonderful way to do that, right? It really kind of can create new brain pathways that are different than the ones that have been so well worn in active addiction.
And lot of, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to go in a different direction. I was just going to mention, as a nature photographer, I need to give a plug to finding art in nature, because it's everywhere. And it's, science has proven that being in nature helps to provide calm and helps to de-stress. I'm that person who, when I go on a walk with someone, I will stop because I see a leaf that's standing on its side. All right, branch, excuse me, a branch that looks like a face or a body or something. I notice every little thing that's different, and when you start paying attention, it really makes a difference. Being out in nature can be very therapeutic. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of artists too, at least for myself, when I get stressed, I want to make art. It's like stress drives me to make art. And a lot of artists who suffer from depression, art can be a big relief to them, because once you start making a piece, you get in a flow state and the world just disappears. So if you can take the initiative just to get the supplies together and start making something, it doesn't have to be good or pleasant to look at. It just has to be the process of making it. So I think that for a lot of artists, they turn their pain into this purpose of the process is the purpose, not necessarily the finished piece. And for many of the artists, this was their first time sharing anything about this part of the journey of their lives, which was very interesting as well. It was the first time they talked to other artists about what their story was about. And I think for many people, they keep that private. And so this was a very interesting opportunity for them to speak freely and in good company and be, forthcoming about this part of their lives. So it was really nice to see these other byproducts develop over the course of the whole project.
Yeah, I
the stigma, right?
Yeah.
I say, as an artist, as part of this, I'm a very private person. So it scared me to put this out there. And I wasn't even in the thick of it, but like just being on the periphery even, it definitely took gumption, though I knew I was going to do it from the it was kind of scary to be putting it out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So glad that I did, and I am so appreciative for the whole opportunity. I feel honored to be a part of this whole thing and give kudos to Spectrum for being so open-minded about how they approach this, and of course Juniper Rag, you did a fabulous job overseeing it.
I think
Nancy,
it was just
sorry, go.
a great collective effort, Nancy. And thank you and the other artists for being a part of it, because it really impacted us so much.
And let's not forget, Michelle, you did also include your art in this.
Yeah,
I did. I shared a story as well.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So Nancy, you talked about, the apprehension of sharing and putting it out there as a private person. And I just, it struck me that vulnerability, earlier we talked about ripple effect, and that vulnerability will then let somebody else realize, oh, it's okay to open up,
yeah.
right? It's okay to, share that I'm not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine, those pieces that are in the therapist's office and all the interactions that, they will get to witness because somebody was vulnerable and shared with whoever's in that office. Hey, this is my story. This is where I came from. And it's just the ripple effect of hope, and it's unending how much positive impact that could have just because one person chose to be vulnerable.
And that's another difference with the Spectrum collection, because they had the vision of the collective storytelling and sharing those stories. This is unlike other collections that you see in any other healthcare environment, because they really dig down on the sharing. And you go into doctors' offices and you see sometimes mass-produced art on the wall, but there's art on the wall. This collection is just so personal and so organic in nature and so forthcoming, and a complete package, really, when you think of seeing the art, hearing the artist's story, and then knowing that person's going to walk away with something more just from looking at the piece of art. So it's not just seeing a piece of art on a waiting room wall at all.
And that's that power of storytelling and being vulnerable and sharing our own personal stories, right? It helps others feel connected. It helps others feel like I could do this too, right? So I know there was even a shift with some artists that changed their mind and said, you know what, I am going to share my story. I notice all these other well-esteemed, wonderful artists doing that, and now it feels safe, right? To share that about my story, about my life, to put that out there, right? And so we see that all the time in recovery spaces, right? You see it in a group session, right? Where one person shares and then we start to build safety in that group, and then everybody starts to, and they start to benefit from that, right? We see it in, mutual support meetings, like throughout the recovery spaces. We see it when we do our family support meetings, right? That's really, one of, our Jesse's one of the facilitators for that group, but on Wednesday nights on Zoom, again, another plug for that. But if anybody's interested, just go ahead and email us at Jesse. You'll have to fill in the email address.
I will double check that email because I gave the wrong one last time.
Nope. But we have an open invite family support meeting for anybody. You don't have to be, a family or support person of somebody in a Spectrum of New England Recovery Center program. You could we've had people call from Canada. We've had people call from across the country in Colorado and other spaces. You just, need to come and you can listen, and then you can share if you want. And we see that all the time in that family support group, that people might show and they might not say a word in the first time that they come. And then in the second time, they might share a little. And then they start to check in and be like, hey, how is your loved one doing? Are you all right? And that starts to build that safety and connection that allows
community.
Yeah.
And if you are interested in that, the email is magnolia@spectrumhealthsystems.org. Email that, and then you get the bounce back Zoom link.
Yep. And it's open to anyone.
Anybody.
So Lisa, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. Some artists were not sharing their story in the beginning, and we shared the other artists' stories with them, and they changed their mind. And I forgot that had happened. Yeah, thanks for reminding me.
It makes so much sense, right? Like you can only be vulnerable when you feel safe to be vulnerable. And that's part of why we're so private, right? Because not being private means we're putting our insides on our outsides and allowing others to see that. And there's a lot of inherent stigma, even if we're just have been through something or supporting someone else in active addiction, or if we are in recovery ourselves, there's still a lot of stigma out there, a lot of vulnerability, and that's really hard to do. And so creating safe spaces, which is something that we strive to do in all of our programs, but we created both a safe space for our patients and a safe space for our artists, which is just really cool.
Yeah. And this was very public facing because we were promoting it online. So it just goes to show the power of this collective unity around the purpose of the whole call for art and the program.
Very cool. Michelle, if other organizations, because it sounds like that Juniper Rag would be open to doing this again and would love to do more similar calls like this. So we get a lot of recovery organizations that might listen, right? If you type in addiction in your podcast platform, like we come up. So we get a lot of folks in the recovery community and in healthcare that do listen to our podcast. If anybody was like, you know what, that's really cool, I'm opening a new program or a sober home or a unit or whatever it might be, recovery center, like cool things, like how might they reach out to you to find out if there's a way you can help them with that call?
So our website is juniperrag.com, and there is a section on there for corporate programming. But if you have a situation that doesn't fit anything you see on our website, we'd be happy to have a conversation and just find out what your needs are and create something that fits what you're looking for. The purpose of the call for Spectrum was so meaningful that we really want to work with other people to transform their spaces in this way.
And I can just say from my perspective, right? Like we could have thought that would be a cool idea, put something out on social media on our pages and be like, hey, anybody want to give us art? That's not the same thing, right? As really like reaching artists. And that's kind of the difference, I think, in what we so appreciate with working with you, Michelle, and Juniper Rag was, we don't have access to artists, but you do, right? And we know the universal impact of addiction. And so we anticipated that potentially some of the artists that, would see this call for art might have experience in this space and might be interested in submitting. And we had kind of a pretty large response to that, but it's different than just kind of putting it out there and doing it, right? And then having that opportunity to really curate the art, both for like we described, kind of that mission, the statement, the actual art pieces kind of being what we were looking for in a cohesive, although diverse way. And that's what, really you were able to support for us, because we definitely would have not been able to do anything like that on our own.
So it's cool too, because we have connections to thousands of artists and they're all very diverse. So if you're looking for a specific kind of artwork or a certain vibe you want in the space, we can certainly reach out to artists too directly, as well as having a call for art where it's a spontaneous submission. But we have thousands of really cool artists all around New England, the United States, and some abroad too. So we have, we're in touch with so many.
Oh, cool. And just reflecting back to this week's theme too of purpose, that, you, Michelle, have brought everyone together under this umbrella to share the art with the world. What a wonderful gift. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for noticing, but also it's not a choice. It's something that we're driven to do. My partner Pyle and I, we're artists ourselves, and that's how Juniper Rag kind of started. We're marketers and we're artists. So we knew so many artists that were just so amazing, and we just wanted everyone to know who they were. And so that's kind of how it started.
Well, I, for one, am grateful that it started.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And bringing art in places that it hasn't been before, or reaching people it hadn't reached. And I just also want to reflect and say, I really appreciate, your art in particular, but like that nature component, right? We incorporate that in a lot of spaces, and we do walks and we have these healing gardens that are inpatients, but the ability to have kind of, nature in art lets you bring that into your space so that you get to keep that right after the walk. You get to keep that with you, at all times, even in hard moments. You still get to look up, and there is that nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's really cool. Once the art is shared, it also becomes a bridge where viewers see their own stories reflected back. The art is meaningful for the artist and for the space, but when the viewer looks at it, their lived experience kind of is reflected, and it gives kind of a language where words fail. These pictures that are hanging on your wall kind of express something that the viewers can all share, whether it's in nature or on the walls of Spectrum. It's very cool.
Can I give a plug to Juniper Rag?
You sure can.
Oh my goodness.
I'm a photographer first and foremost, and that's the bucket, if you will, that my career has been in full force since 2019. But one of my neighbors had a friend who entered one of the Juniper Rag calls for art and got in, and I took a look at it and I'm like, that's kind of cool. So I started entering their calls for art, and just getting into that community is so different than being just a photographer. And it's making me look at art in a different way and getting more art into my world, which has totally shifted my career in a very positive way. So I'm always grateful and thankful for Juniper Rag, and I can't say enough good things about them.
Thank
they're
you,
great.
Nancy.
Yes, absolutely.
We love sharing your work too.
Oh, thank you.
Especially this
really
piece.
cool.
This might be my favorite piece.
Yeah,
from
I
you
think
so
it's mine
far.
of the collection.
Yeah.
Too. I really love it. So yeah, definitely check it out online if you want to see the piece that Nancy did. It really is absolutely amazing. It really struck all of us. And I love that concept of what Juniper Rag is doing to bring artists into community with each other, because that's exactly what we do, right, in recovery, is that we bring people into recovery community, because then things shift, right? Then things expand, then things feel more possible than they did when you were on your own in isolation.
You find your tribe, you find your people.
That was exciting for us too, that our missions were so similar. The mission of a recovery center and the mission of an art organization were very similar.
Well, that's probably a beautiful way to actually end this episode, because that is so very true. I just want to thank you both for your art, for your involvement in organization of this call, but also for the ongoing work that you continue to do to bring art into this world. And Jesse, thanks for 4 fun weeks of recovery month.
Recovery Month 2025. It's hard to believe it's almost over, but there's still many more recovery events to come. And join us next month. Do all that fun podcast stuff. Like, subscribe, check it out. And we'll be back again next month with another great guest. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.